Girl down on my knees. These little words I begin to sing. I be Lord, please help us.
Today we're going to be going over the installation of our Alpha and Bravo roof rack for the 2022 Ford Raptor. We're going to start with the Alpha rack. The Alpha rack consists of outside armor, groove tech, spines, load bar clamps, and also a windscreen, but we'll talk about that when we're ready to do the installation. The first thing to do is install the spines to the drip rails of the truck so that you have something to attach the rest of the roof rack to. You have a driver and a passenger side. Production models have a D and a P at the very front of the unit, but you'll also notice that the front tab is substantially taller than the middle and the rear. The short tab goes to the back of the vehicle. To locate the spine on the vehicle, simply locate the black rubber trim at the end of the drip rail and butt the end of the spine up against the end of the drip rail. Hold it in place, use a marker, and just draw every circle onto the drip rail so that you know where to drill it. We ship you the 3/16" drill bit that you need for the final size for the rivets, but we recommend that you drill these out as a pilot bit. I'm going to use an 1/8" bit in the center of each circle, just because the smaller bits are easier to bite down and less likely to walk as you drill the hole. Just line the tip of the drill bit up in the center of the hole. The top of your truck is aluminum, so it drills really, really soft. So what's going on inside of here is you have your drip rail metal, and then underneath it you have the side of your truck. So this thing has a small gap in here, and that's where we're going to work our rivet. You don't need to use a stop collar on this truck. It kind of has a built-in stop collar. You can't physically go down too far. When you're drilling the hole, you'll feel it go through the first layer, and then watch it, it will actually stop itself. Hear that? That's that inner metal skin right there. I can't go any further than that. So you don't have to worry about your headliner or anything in there. There's no internals in the way at all. I've got all the pilot holes drilled. Now I'm going to swap out to the 3/16" bit that's provided in your kit. And we're just going to walk those holes out to the right size so that the rivets fit perfect. Now I just want to clean all the debris out of the channel from drilling the holes, and we'll be ready to put our foam seal strip inside. Your kit's got two pre-cut 53-inch adhesive foam tape strips. Just like you located the spine against the back of that rubber seal, that's where we're going to start our foam tape. I'm just going to release some of the backing. This foam tape is the same width as your channel, so you really can't get this wrong. It should start even with the factory foam gasket, and you don't want to pull on it because it's foam. It'll stretch. Just undo enough of it that you can work it and let it fall down in the channel with just enough pressure to hold it in place, and then once we have the whole thing in, we'll come back and press it down. This foam tape serves as a barrier for the spines and the rivets. It's better than putting silicone in here and making a huge mess and getting it all over your vehicle. You will silicone the rivet heads when you're done, just so they're sealed to the elements, but you don't need silicone between the roof of the vehicle and the spine. I'm going to use the spine as a template for a pick tool to locate the spine in place over those holes that we drilled and just poke that through. You can see where it lines up. That's going to help the rivet just slide right into place. Now I've got all those punched in. Now I'm just going to get my rivet gun, my rivets, and come back and attach the spine to the vehicle. We're going to start with the very back hole. You need a rivet gun. It's got to have an 1/8" mandrel in it. You can pick up a rivet gun at virtually any hardware store. You can order them on Amazon. It doesn't matter which one you have. You only need to use this thing 20 times. I wouldn't spend $100 on one with the fancy swivel head like this. Just enough to set this. It's also helpful to have a little rubber mallet so that when you seat it, you can tamp it down and make sure that the rivet's fully seated before you install it. I've got that pushed all the way down as far as I can push it. The rivet gun will do the rest of it. But if you watch the foam seal around here for compression, when I start to seat that, it starts to really pull itself down and then it'll pop. And there's your stem. Now just work your way down the whole vehicle, one at a time, and any time that you can't get it to push down, just tamp it in place with the mallet. I've got all the rivets in on one side. I'm ready to go do the same thing on the other side. A note about the foam strip that we send you. I pulled on it a little bit when I put it on, so I got some left over here at the edge. You can trim that off if you want, or you can leave it. It's really not going to hurt anything. So let's go put the other side on. Then we'll come back and silicone the tops of all the rivet heads, and we're ready to proceed with the rest of the installation. We use an exterior grade RTV silicone. We use a lot of black here. We buy it by the tube. You can use white, black, clear, doesn't matter. What matters is that it's silicone and it's exterior grade. All I'm trying to do is cover up the head of the rivet. That's all you need right there. Next, we want to pre-assemble the load bar clamp hardware. Find the bag that has your shorter bolts, lock washers, flat washers, and these black 3-tap threaded inserts. Before you can put these together, you need to put the VC3 thread locker on the threads of all this hardware. When we ship it to you, there's a collar on here. You need to get rid of that, and then the top will actually crack the seal. It is super important to do this over a surface you don't really care about, and never squeeze the tube. So apply the thread locker to about the last 4 or 5 threads there, and then make sure that it goes 360 degrees all the way around the fastener. And you're going to repeat that with every bolt in this kit. For the Raptor, you've got 6 feet, so you should have 18 bolts like this. Once you've got the VC3 on all the hardware, let it air dry. Right now, see how it's gummy and stringy? That's no good. You want to let it set for 10 to 15 minutes until you come back and this is completely dry, like here. When I touch this, nothing happens, it just stays in place. This is an anaerobic thread locker. It's like a shock. So when it's dry and you put it in, it works properly. If you put it in wet, it does nothing. All 6 load bar clamps that ship with the 2022 Raptor are the exact same part. That means that on the driver's side, they're going to face one direction. On the passenger side, they would be the exact reverse of that. But you load the hardware into them the exact same way. This is the outside, and these are the parts that connect to the spine. You'll use different positions of these to get the rack to the proper height on the roof, and we'll go over that in a minute. But for now, take your bolt. Each one gets a lock washer and a flat washer. See the protrusion on the threaded insert? That goes to the inside of the load bar clamp. And you just want to start these by hand. And you want to leave them loose enough that you get that play in there, like that. That's really going to help you feed the load bars across. If you have it too tight, the load bars won't want to slide when you feed them from the driver's side to the passenger side to start putting the rack together. The Alpha and Bravo racks ship with different hardware kits because one of them has way more steps to put it together than the other. One of the major differences is how we anchor the load bar clamps to the spines that you riveted to the roof of the vehicle. On an Alpha rack, it's going to be hex head hardware, and this is imperials, so you'll need a 1/2 inch wrench for the bolt and a 1/2 inch wrench for the nylock. In this case, you would put a washer over the bolt. You'll put the spine to the inside of the load bar clamp, and depending on which position you're in, you'll feed the bolt through. On the back side, your spine would be right here. You'll put the other washer and the nylock like that. On a Bravo rack, it's going to be button head hardware. There's no washer on the front side. Your spine will go here, then you'll put your flat washer on, and then you'll put your nylock on. And for the Bravo, you'll need a 5mm Allen and a 13mm wrench. This is metric. We're using the same truck for the Alpha and Bravo installation video. Ultimately, this truck gets a Bravo rack on it, so that's the hardware that we're going to use here. It's going to be your button heads, your flat washers, and your nylon lock nuts. Notice that you've got 3 holes in each foot. Those do have to be in a specific location at the rear, the middle, and the front of the vehicle. The back one goes all the way down. So you should have 2 exposed holes at the bottom, just hanging out. And be sure that you put the load bar clamp on the outside of the spine. I knew that was going to fall off. Can you tell it fall? Can I have it back? Start the hardware, but leave it loose like this so that it can articulate itself down, and it's going to help you line up the load bars across the driver and passenger side. That's the rear foot. Middle foot, you're going to use the center section holes. So you'll have, these will be open and these will be open. And again, leave this guy loose. We'll tighten this hardware up once the rack's on the vehicle and set in place, squared up. That's the last thing that we'll do is tighten that hardware. The front foot goes on the tallest tab at the front of the vehicle, and you're going to use the very bottom holes in this location. Because the truck arcs like this, we need the feet to be level when they're installed. That's why they're going in different positions. This needs to be all the way up at the top to be even with the rest of the load bars in the vehicle. Next, we want to feed 3 of the load bars across the load bar clamps from driver to passenger side. I'm going to show you guys the middle. The rear one and the front one are the exact same. Just make sure that you have that loose enough that it floats back and forth and that this is still loose enough to articulate. Line up that threaded insert to the channel on the side of your load bar and then feed it across to the other side. Just like that. Once you have all 3 load bars in the truck, you'll be ready to measure your distance on either side to get the load bars centered. Tighten up this, leave this loose until we're finished. You'll be ready to put the sides on. Next, we want to use a tape measure to make sure that the load bars are center from left to right on the vehicle. You'll be measuring from the edge of your load bar clamp where it's nice and flat to the outside edge of your load bar. You'll need to repeat the measurements on the driver and passenger side, adjusting the load bar from left to right until you have it centered. Once you have it centered, you'll push up on the load bar so that the top of this load bar clamp is flush with the top of your load bar, and then use a 5/32 Allen wrench to tighten them all up. We measured the load bar distance between the clamp and the end of the load bar on both sides. At the rear, middle, and front position, we've got them even on both sides, so we went ahead and tightened these up. You'll notice that these are still loose enough that we can wiggle them around. This step is the same for the Alpha and the Bravo racks, so no matter what you're installing, you should be to this point before you're ready to attach your sides. We're going to do the Alpha rack first, so we'll grab the groove tack and the hardware for that and stick them on the left and right side of the truck. The groove tack that comes with your Alpha rack is identical for the driver and passenger side. What makes it one side or the other is the direction that this riv nut is installed. See how this protrusion sticks up? That faces the inside of the rack. That makes this a driver's side piece. At the rear of the rack, you want the first long slot. Do not use the small slot. That's for the rear load bar. Use the first long slot, the button head hardware in your kit, and just start these by hand. Now we're ready to do the middle and the front. Before you tighten this hardware up, you've got to locate the groove tech on the truck where it's supposed to be. These slots should be pressed all the way to the front. So you want to slide the groove tech all the way back until your hardware bottoms out in the slot that it's designed to screw into. Once you have that, use a 5/32 Allen wrench, tighten the groove tech into place. Then you'll go put the passenger side on, then you're ready to install the rest of your load bars. The front and rear load bar will mount with the hex head bolts. Front load bar can be mounted horizontally across this slot just like the rest of the load bars, but it can also be mounted vertically to give increased rigidity for larger light options. If you mount it vertically, the top hole will align with the top slot, and then you can move it to any of these positions, and the bottom hole will always be here. These small rectangles in between each one are for passing wiring from the driver to the passenger side or vice versa. I started the hardware by hand for the front load bar. We just want to slide it all the way back and not tighten it down fully right now. We want to leave ourselves as much room as we can to get in here to tighten up the windscreen. The rear load bar mounts horizontally in the very small slot at the rear of the rack. If you look up on top of this truck, it's got an additional mount up here from Larson for magnetic antenna mounts. This isn't present on every Ford Raptor. We did design the rack to leave enough clearance above something like this, but yours probably doesn't have that. The rear load bar is not adjustable, so you could go ahead and use a 7/16 socket and tighten these bolts into place.
Easy.
We've got the front and rear load bars in. Now all that's left for the load bar is just to install the remaining two in the center. They'll align to those horizontal slots. You can put them in any location in there. Just make sure that they're even on the driver and passenger side, and they can always be adjusted later to help align with different pieces of gear. Now that we've got all the load bars in, groove tech secure, this is one big assembly. Now I'll go back and work around the rack and tighten up all the load bar clamp to spine hardware. Again, if you're doing a Bravo rack, you're going to need a 5mm Allen wrench and a 13mm wrench. If you're using an Alpha rack, you'll have a pair of 1/2-inch wrenches. Next, we're going to install the windscreen into the groove tech. Depending on what you placed your order for, it could look like the solid here, no cut. It could have machined holes across the front. It could have a large teardrop for the Universal 40. There's so many options that we're not going to go over how to mount your lights into the windscreens in this video. Just refer to our windscreen lighting guide. And you'll want 2 people to do this. It's really hard to hand this across the truck by yourself to get both sides to anchor. So make sure you have somebody to help you put this on. Align the holes in the flange bent on your windscreen to the holes at the front of your groove tech. You slide your bolts through the holes, align the two, and then install your nylock on the back side. You'll use a 5mm Allen wrench and a 13mm wrench to tighten this into place. Next step's to attach the armor to the groove tech. You've got a series of holes across here. The very front hull and rear hull will anchor at the riv nut locations at the front and the back of the rack. The 4 inner holes are for your grab handles, so we'll do those last. You need the 35 mil bolts with lock washers and your black spacers, 2 of each for both sides. Align and slip the bolt and lock washer through the armor like that. The spacer goes on the back side. The spacer will sit between the armor and groove tech to provide room for wiring. Then just tighten those bolts in with a 5mm Allen wrench and you'll be ready to tie and install your handles. The last step in your alpha assembly is to attach your grab handles. Refer to our video on grab handle tying before you get to this step. Then take your completed handles, the longer bolts and lock washers. Go ahead and install a bolt into each lace plate. 2 spacers slide over here. Your armor is going to set in this location. Align the length of the bolt to the 2 holes. Put a plastic spacer between the armor and groove tech. And then use a 5mm Allen wrench to tighten them up. Now that you've got the first 3 load bars mounted on the roof of the truck attached to the spines, we're ready to put on the Bravo sides. Your load bars are going to attach to these horizontal slots across here. We'll show you which one's on the truck when we get up to that point. Your rear load bar and then all the other load bars across here. The front load bar can be mounted either horizontal across here or vertically across here. Grab your load bar hardware, 5/32 Allen wrench, and let's go put this on. The rear load bar is going to align to the long horizontal slot located here. Don't try and use this small short one at the back. And you just want to put these in by hand. The middle one, you'll skip the next one here, and then the middle one will align here. And then the front one goes at this second slot from the front of the rack. Once you've got the first 3 load bars started, just watch this outer slot here and push the rack backwards until the bolts bottom out in the front of each slot. That's the proper position for this roof rack, and then tighten these 6 bolts up. All right, I've got the driver's side done. Now go do the exact same thing in the same position with the passenger side. We've got both sides on the truck now. Next, we're gonna put the windscreen in. Make sure you have a second person for this. It's pretty difficult to put these in by yourself. Line up the holes in the flange on your windscreen to the 2 holes at the front of your rack, and then just put your hardware in. Reach around the back side of it and put in the nylocks. Once you've got the hardware started by hand, use a 3/16 inch Allen wrench and a 1/2 inch wrench on the inside and tighten up the hardware. Next steps to install the missing load bars at the other locations. The front load bar can be mounted horizontally like this or vertically like this. If you mount it vertically, the top bolt will go in the horizontal slot. Then the lower bolt will align with one of these holes to space it where you need it. It's going to help you mount bigger light bar assemblies, stuff like that. It's pretty irrelevant to us which way you do it. It's just an added feature to be able to mount bigger lights like LP6s and have a more sturdy mounting surface. The front load bar, we're going to push all the way forward. If you're running the rack unloaded, you want this load bar as close to the windscreen as it can be. That's going to be the quietest configuration that you'll have. The rear load bar will attach horizontally inside this small slot at the rear of the rack. The remaining two load bars can be installed anywhere within this slot. You can always move them around or adjust them to help line up with gear. Just make sure that you have them in the same position on both sides of the rack. Now that you've completed the assembly of your Alpha or Bravo roof rack, all that's left is to go back and tighten up all the hardware and then take it down the trail and get after it.